Welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. I guess it really depends on when you're watching this. I would just like to welcome you to the 6th annual last lecture event. As you can see, we're not really in Stohn Hall or Wenjack Theater, but we are bringing this event to you virtually because we felt it was so important for all of you to have this event, especially those of you that are graduating. For those of you that I've not had the honor of meeting yet, let me introduce myself. My name is Stephanie Muehlethaler, and I'm the principal of Otonabee College and your host for this event today. I would like to start by acknowledging the land that we're currently on, or the land that Trent University resides on. We respectfully acknowledge that we are on the treaty and the traditional territory of the Miccosukee Anishinaabe. We offer our gratitude to the First Peoples for their care for and teachings about our earth and our relations. May we honor these teachings. We are gathered here today to celebrate each and every one of you and your journeys as a community of learners as you embark on this really exciting next chapter of your life. As it's nearing the end of April, I'm pretty sure that all of your exams are done, and this really truly is the last lecture of your semester. And for those of you graduating, this will be the last lecture of your university career here at Trent. This is a huge milestone, and we're so excited to be gathered here today with your friends and your family, those faculty, university staff, and members of the community that are watching to celebrate all that you've done and what comes next. Over the last 4 years or so, give or take, depending on what kind of path you took here at Trent, it's been a privilege to develop these relationships with each of you and witnessing your journey to the completion of your undergraduate degree. The last lecture event, if you didn't know, is an annual event that we do here in Otonabee, and it's celebrated by universities across North America. The event was inspired by Randy Pausch from Carnegie Mellon University when he did his last lecture. We wanted to bring it to Trent as a way to celebrate each and every one of you and what you've accomplished as the class of 2016, because as we remember, Trent is a little bit different. We really embark on our learning the year we started, not the year we graduate. And so we invite all of you to participate today on social media or whenever you're watching this by using the hashtag #MyLastLecture and tagging your college. For the next hour or so, you'll have the honor of listening to a group of different speakers that will give you a little bit of a talk and share with you their own stories about Trent University and some of their own words of wisdom. I am pretty sure that you will be inspired one way or another. What I think is really special is that all of you, the graduating class, nominated and voted for these speakers, and that for me is quite special. So with no further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Amelia Munday. Amelia is currently working as the Orientation and Transition Coordinator in the Office of Student Affairs at Trent. As an alumna of the university, she's had this really unique opportunity not to work just for 1 or 2 or 3 or even 4 of the colleges at Trent, but she's worked for all 5 colleges while she's been a student. When she's not working with the exceptional student leaders to support their own peers and incoming students with the transition into their own lives at Trent University, you can find Amelia scaling the wall at her local climbing gym or walking around Peterborough with her Bernedoodle, Summit, who's truly adorable. So if we can truly, all together virtually, give a very warm welcome to Amelia Munday. Amelia?
Thanks, Steph. I'd like to thank those who had nominated me for this lecture. I'm really excited to be here with you all virtually, and having been to many last lectures over the years, I had never thought that I'd be sharing the stage as your staff resource person. I am so excited to be sharing my words to the graduating class, and I hope that the story that I'm about to share with you kind of normalizes the fear and the excitement that many of you might be feeling right now. Luckily for you all, while preparing for this lecture, I had realized that through my sporadic journaling, which I started just weeks before I had gotten my acceptance letter from Trent in March of 2011, had captured how I was feeling, both when I accepted my offer to Trent and when I had finished my classes, and the transitional period from when school had finished, where you are today, and so much in between. This is a story of self-compassion, and sparing you with the somewhat embarrassing details in this journal with coming out, crushes, anxiety, failure, there were some real lessons and successes that I would like to celebrate with you. Through sharing these wins, I hope that you can enter into the post-grad world with kindness for yourself as you transition into this next chapter. When I first graduated from Trent with a Bachelor of Arts degree in English and Geography, I was determined to leave my undergrad and pursue a career in student affairs. When looking back at these journal entries, I can recall I was feeling in the last semester of my undergrad and the emotion behind that. School was a struggle for me, and as a first-generation student, and I had some experiences with anxiety, I was back for an extra semester and taking the last classes towards my degree in my 5th year. I'd attributed some of my successes into getting to the end of my degree to just the exceptional services at Trent, who I had the privilege of working with. Some of these departments included housing as a residence liaison in Otonabee and Champlain, as a rebound guide in the Office of Student Affairs, and working in the Zosky and Trail College offices. I had moved into LEC in September of 2011. I knew that I wanted to give back to help students who were also struggling get to the end of their degree. At the time, I wasn't sure what this would look like professionally. So in December of 2015, I picked up my journal and I wrote, I only have about 4 weeks left of my undergrad, which is pretty cool. I had no clue what I was getting into at the beginning of this university experience, but I'm so happy that I'm almost finished. Who knows what's going to happen next? The next steps will be exciting. Well, who knows indeed. I'd applied to every job that was remotely close to what I thought I was qualified for. Yet, through dozens of applications and several interviews, the results were not turning up in my favor. Naturally, when this was the result, I was rolling through the rejections from every interview that I had attempted. And looking back, I can attribute this to some extreme interview anxiety and lack of experience. I was scared, and often my peers weren't sharing these struggles in this stage of the game after graduating. But I later found that some others had similar experiences before landing their first job after graduating. Fortunately, I had some amazing feedback with interview skills, and I continue to practice and work on improving these skills. This is kind of my plug to continue to see academic advising and the career space after you've graduated. I made the decision to come back to Trent for an incredible year and complete the Human Resource Management Postgraduate Certificate Program. And it felt unreal that at the time I had been counting down the days, the papers, the exams, only to be going back to do it all again. But this time, I had a lot more direction and I knew what I was hoping to accomplish. Leading into that academic year, I had accepted a last-minute opening as the Trail College Orientation Week co-chair, which came up late that summer. And little did I know how much work that was going to be, or how relevant it would be to the current work I am doing at Trent today. It gives me so much appreciation for the work our students continue to give back to those communities. I've been able to apply so much of what I'd learned in the HR management program, and it taught me that any experience can be applicable to the countless jobs that you can recognize if you recognize these skills and abilities that you gain through these jobs. This gave me more courage to explore a diverse array of jobs, not necessarily related to what I had gone to school in or had experience in. And this led me to some pretty cool opportunities. After graduating from the HR certificate program, I ventured into the budding industry of medical cannabis education and prescriptions at a company called BodyStream. I used theories that I had used at Trent, supporting students, to also support students in their new experience with cannabis as a medication, orienting them to systems and finding ways to challenge the ways that things have been done in the past. A month into starting at the clinic, I was promoted to supervisor, and a few months after that, Peterborough had the highest performing clinic in all of Ontario. This success was by building a strong staff team who shared a common goal and were motivated by helping others. Everyone will have a different experience during and after undergrad, but I'd like to reflect on one of the best lessons I had learned outside of the classroom during my time at Trent. As a rebound guide, I didn't realize how impactful this lesson was going to be, but through how impactful that this lesson was going to be through a huge transition in my life. This concept was first introduced to me, and it's called circles of control. The concept is about focusing on things that you can control. Things like your words, your actions, your reactions, efforts, ideas, mistakes, and behavior. The easiest way I can describe to you this concept is that any force in your life, whether it is the action of someone in your life or a large world event that can personally impact you, this can be changed through your choices. For example, you can't really control when it rains, but you can change what you are wearing, or you can choose to stay inside. You can control those words, actions, ideas, and efforts, mistakes, and behaviors. And keeping self-compassion in mind, it is important to be critical of your own personal definition of success. It is the choices that we make in our own circle of control that will lead you to your own personal path. Be kind to yourself and recognize that even small experiences are giving you the skills and the abilities that can lead you to your goals. This is not something that we are expected to experience alone. I had so many people who had helped support me at all stages of this journey, professionally and personally. As a staff, I try to pay forward some of these lessons that gave me the confidence that I have today. There is no formula for what this looks like, but at Trent, we challenge the way that we think, and we reflect on Trent's Latin motto, Nunc cognesso ex parte, translated to, now I know in part. We are constantly learning and constantly evaluating our own positions in the world. Set high expectations for yourself, but don't forget to be kind to others and yourself along the way. To end my portion of the last lecture, I just wanted to circle back to a quote that I had found just before graduating from Trent's HR program, which I think is relevant in some ways to your experience as a graduating class. Sometimes things don't go as planned. Yes, I know that there will be challenges in my life that arise again, but I have never felt so confident to face them. I'm constantly feel fortunate for my good health, my amazing friends, the jobs that I've held over the years, and my family. And to you, graduating class, I wish you nothing but the best in these next steps. Good luck, and I hope that we will see you again over the years. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amelia. I'm a bit of a nerd, so I love that you brought theory into your last lecture. But I think what's so important that you shared with graduating students and even those in their undergrad is that everything that they're feeling, this is okay, and to recognize those different emotions, and that not everybody has their stuff figured out. This is an exciting but sometimes overwhelming path once you graduate, and it just shows you that there's so many different ways to get to the areas that you're so passionate about. And even if it's not going directly on that path that you designed, each of those different experiences can really contribute to who you are as a person. And you know, as you mentioned from your HR certificate, you can really take those and make those transferable skills. So Amelia, thank you so much for leaning into the vulnerability and sharing with us some really wise words for this year's graduating class. Thank you once again, Amelia. I now would like to introduce our alumni lecturer. As Managing Director and Group Head Real Estate, Jaime Mckenna holds 20 years of professional business experience. She frequently speaks on expert panels at conferences across the country, and she chaired the 2018 Canadian Apartment Investment Conference. Jaime holds a Bachelor of Business Admin degree with honors at Trent University, and both a Chartered Professional Accountant and Chartered Business Valuator designation. And she's also from Otonabee College. So, I mean, I'm a little biased there. But if we can all virtually, please give Jaime a warm welcome. Welcome, Jaime. I will pass it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Stephanie. I appreciate the very generous introduction. But first of all, I want to start off by congratulating everybody on this call today for your time at Trent. You've had the privilege of going to a school that is unique in so many ways, and you won't necessarily appreciate all that uniqueness for many years to come. Doing this video call had me thinking back to what technology was like when I was at Trent. I'm a 1997 student, 2001 graduate, and I remember at the time I had no telephone, or I had no cell phone. There was no messenger, and the only way I could check email was a system called Pine at the time, where I would rush to a computer in the library and hope nobody was sitting at it so I could communicate with my friends that weren't at this school. I bought my first computer when I started at Trent, and it was $2,000 and probably had less computing power than my calculator does today. But aside from that, when I was asked to do the last lecture, I felt a lot of pressure to have some kind of legendary message I was going to share with the graduates. But then I stepped back and said, don't put that pressure on yourself. I'm going to just tell you my story, and if something resonates, that's great. I'm a second generation Trent graduate. My uncle went to Trent before me, and I'm hopefully right now raising a third generation graduate. He's 9 years old. I won't put too much pressure on him yet. I was raised in a family that good marks and going to university were not optional, but I also didn't have the financial means to go to school and travel far away. Trent fit my bill. It had a business program, and I could drive to it from my home in my 1986 Chevy Celebrity that I called Zoe. It also let me go home on the weekends and work. It's not easy in your first year making friends when you can't go to residence, so I really connected with my classmates at the time. I was in the business program, and we spent a lot of time in Blackburn Hall. By second year, I had actually saved up enough money that I could move to Peterborough and rent an apartment. But I still had to go home on the weekends to work double shifts so I could make ends meet. To say I was living paycheck to paycheck is really generous. Work paid rent, OSAP paid tuition, and credit cards paid for the bars, to be honest. When I think back to my situation at Trent, I very clearly recall one night that burned into my memory and I go back to often in my life. I was living on Brock Street in the apartments there, and I looked into my cupboard, and the only food I had was a single can of tuna. I had no money in my bank account, my credit cards were maxed, and my parents didn't have the means to help me. And for the first time in my life, I felt desperation. But somehow, I still seem to manage to have enough to go to the pub during the week, but I'll come back to that later. Through this fear, developed lessons of humility for me. You go down one route, you hit a dead end, you go down another, and you turn around, and you figure it out. I've never followed the straightest route, but I figured it out along the way. Through all that fighting to eat and pay rent, working double shifts, trying to get good marks, there was a shining light. I loved Trent. I loved my classes, my friends, my professors. I loved the feeling of community. I remember sitting around in fourth year, and my friends were looking forward to moving on and growing up, and all I could think of is, I don't want to go. I didn't want to, because the thought of trying to survive without Trent was daunting to me. I often credit my time at Trent for the first break in my career. There were a lot of reasons that Trent was a major impact in my career success, but this one example always has stuck out to me. I had an opportunity to interview for an intern position at Bell Canada. It was at the head office in downtown Toronto, and it was a big deal. The chance of me getting it, I felt, was really low at the time. Trent wasn't necessarily recognized for the business program when I was there, and I was going up against Queen's and U of T and Ivy. But the thing with this interview is it involved a presentation. And the one thing Trent was really good at is it gave us the opportunity to get in front of classes and present. The small class sizes and intimate relationships with professors made this part of every course. So presenting in front of a room was natural to me. And it was really my differentiator. It wasn't how well I valued the IT startup firm in the case. It was the confidence that I got to speak up in front of people. And I got that job. And those communication skills I learned at Trent paid off over and over again. I got promoted quickly through Bell and gained experience by 29 that most people don't get until their 40s. I won't go through my whole career, but I want to say a few things. First of all, I would be remiss not to address what it's like being a woman in a leadership position. For those of you who are not familiar with my background, I started as accounting, but I've actually moved into real estate investments, which is buying and selling real estate. A few years ago, I was at Minto as a chief investment officer of a public company, and now I lead a private real estate company. Where I work is relevant because real estate is one of those last industries that's vastly male dominated. I would argue second probably only to oil and gas or mining. Over 90% of my meetings, I'm the only woman, and at industry social events, it's either me or me and one other woman. I can probably count on two hands the number of women in leadership positions across the country in real estate. The industry talks a lot about how to promote diversity, and I'm asked that question all the time, but I don't really have an answer. So the way that I explain it to my male colleagues is I draw a parallel to being a male nurse when it was primarily a female-dominated profession. I say, picture it. You're equally educated, your colleagues respect you, you do your job well, but you're different. Conversations at the lunchroom center around different topics, social events are catered to different preferences, and you can't help but feel a little bit different. No one's done anything wrong, so how do you fix it? The reality is that sexism does exist. It just manifests itself in different ways in different industries. I remember when I joined at Fengate, my current role, and my head of investments and I had to go on a road trip to Montreal to do a series of meetings. The meetings range from industry social events to boardroom meetings. And afterwards he said to me, Jaime, I can't believe how much harder it is for you than me. So what did he mean? He meant that when we met somebody new, someone who had not worked with me in the past, the default assumed that he was the leader of the company. He meant that in cases where people didn't know me, no one made eye contact with me. He meant that he thought no one assumed I was the decision maker in the room. And he was right. But what I said to John was this: who cares? When it matters, they'll figure it out. The reality is I've worked with many men who have been respectful and supportive throughout my career, and a great deal of my career progression has been driven by male mentors. My point is, don't obsess about an issue you can't change. Instead, do your part to make it more positive. For women who show up every day, help other women in your industry, especially those that are coming up through the ranks. And for those of you that are starting out your career, look for women mentors in the industry. I spend a lot of my time, especially on Fridays, taking calls with women, new Canadians, people trying to understand how to get ahead in the industry. Don't assume, and the one thing I'll say to everybody is don't assume who you're spending time with in a meeting. The woman, the new Canadian, they could be the CEO, so don't make assumptions. But coming back to Trent, when I think about my time with Trent, it really does warm my heart. It was a comfortable place to learn and grow while there was chaos around me. My classmates are still some of the closest friends I have today. Those friends keep it real for me. Those are the friends that I joke about having to cook every day during the quarantine that we're currently in. They remind me that I used to eat Mr. Noodles 6 days a week and pickled eggs at the Pig's Ear. So hopefully some of you got the opportunity to experience the Pig's Ear before it closed. I attribute my success not to the degrees I hold or the accomplishments on my resume, but how I've turned the obstacles in front of me into a positive from a negative. The fear I experienced while I was in university trying to find a meal made me learn that there's always a solution for every problem, and it's up to you to figure it out. The joy I gained from the friendships I made at Trent made me learn that kindness and humor are important at all times. Playing politics, being cutthroat, that's not my style, and it shouldn't be yours. When I mentor new grads, I always say, be nice, and I mean it. You would be amazed at how far kindness goes, and things come back around to you years later. The long hours I worked in retail trying to pay the bills and the late nights I spent studying taught me that there's no substitute for hard work. And last, enjoy the people around you. The experience you are gaining and the things that you are learning, you might not know how it all fits together today, but it will one day. So congratulations, go into the world, have fun, and be nice. Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you, Jamie, so much. There will be a follow-up email, but there's so much that I resonated with in that chat. And thank you for sharing your stories and also the importance of humility. But what I really resonated is just how intentional and thoughtful some of the decisions were, and how resiliency, I think, is probably a really strong muscle of yours, having overcome different obstacles. What I really got from Jamie's conversation and talk was the importance of community. And some of you, like Jamie said, might not realize how important that community is. And maybe some of us who are just a smidgen older than all of you will say, one day you'll realize. But I also, too, didn't go to Trent, but still carry those deep, deep friendships from my undergrad 20-ish so years later. And lastly, I think we hear this message, but I just love it. If we can do anything in this world, is to be kind. So especially with all that's going on, is don't make any assumptions, lean into compassion, and show some kindness to everyone around you. So thank you so much, Jamie, for that. Now I'm going to introduce our faculty speaker today, Dr. Kate Norlock. Kate is the Kenneth Mark Drain Chair in Ethics and a professor in the Department of Philosophy. She teaches courses including Love and Desire and Ethical Theory. She writes about the ethical challenges of being a good person in a non-ideal world where progress sometimes seems hopeless and the needs of others are endless. In her spare time, she bakes, she cooks, and she eats really well. So let's please give a warm virtual welcome to Dr. Kate Norlock. Kate, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you, Stephanie. That was great. And I want to thank the graduating class for this opportunity to provide the last lecture from a professor. Talking with students is by far the best part of my job. So it's been a downside to social distancing that I don't get to see you guys as often. I'm still not used to doing this at a distance. I miss seeing your hands raised for questions. The plus side to you not getting to ask questions is I can say whatever I want. What can you tell me I'm wrong? I know, I'll get emails. So I want to talk to you guys about my specialty, philosophy of forgiveness. And I want you to stick around when you hear the word forgiveness, because not everybody thinks that's the most exciting topic. And you may be wondering, look, why I choose to talk about forgiveness during a last lecture. But I hope to show that if you're graduating, that's an excellent occasion for forgiveness. I want to start with a story about my own university experience too. I'll keep it short, but there is a pattern to these stories that you're hearing today from all the last lecturers, which is the road for all of us was not smooth and straight, right? It provides a little struggle. And mine provided my experience, mine provided my parents with all too many occasions to forgive me. So students who've had my classes have probably heard this already, that my own higher education story is not one of success. I flunked out of university at the end of my first year. I flunked out hard. I had a grade average not much north of 0. It wasn't a 0. I actually went to 1 class. So to this day, I can't precisely tell you what I did with my time. And I didn't go to more than a few parties. I didn't drink much more than anybody who succeeded. And I didn't take up with a steady boyfriend until shortly before I was dismissed. So I have no excuses. I don't have the excuse of computer games. This was the 1980s and 90s, so I can't claim an addiction to that. And my time wasn't completely unstructured. I dependably worked at my part-time job. Some of you might be thinking nice thoughts like, well, you were probably struggling with anxiety. No, I wasn't. I really have no excuses. As I remember that first year, I simply had a great time. I mean, I had a great time. Such a great time that I didn't go to classes. I was meeting so many new people. I was encountering exciting new ideas. It was easy not to think about the courses I was not attending. But eventually the inevitable happened and I was dismissed. So students, some of you might have had this experience, but most of you have not. Can you imagine what you'd tell your parents if you were dismissed from university at the end of your first year? How you'd tell them and what they'd say? Parents, if you're watching, can you imagine your reaction to your kids if you got such news? I'll let you imagine that. But the remarkable thing is, the reactions you're imagining were not my parents' reactions. Given how theatrical and hammy I am, you might be assuming it was high drama in the Norlock household. But such was not the case. That was not my parents. On the contrary, incredibly, as much as I dreaded their reaction, my parents never said a word about it. I've never heard a single word of recrimination from either of them for disappointing them that first year, although I must have. or for wasting their money, which I'm certain I did. They didn't upbraid me when I moved back in with all the possessions I'd moved out just a year ago. They didn't mention it that year I lived at home and devoted myself to community college because I became unbelievably motivated to move back out. It was shame. And they haven't said a negative word about it since. Don't get me wrong, they were definitely worried. They're concerned parents, but they were also blessedly very forgiving, silently forgiving. You don't have to be silent when you're forgiving, but they were. Now that I'm a PhD and a professor in the Department of Philosophy, yay, I find that I write and teach about forgiveness a lot. In fact, when I took up the study, I didn't even think about why I was so motivated to study forgiveness. And now I wonder if it's because I was such a beneficiary of it myself. So I want to talk to you a little about it today. I'm going to do a little lecture because this is my last chance to do philosophy content at you. And then I'm going to tell you what to do because that's how I end all my classes, so telling my students what to do. I kid, I joke. I don't usually boss people around. But on this occasion, I get to because there's no questions. So forgiveness may seem like a heavy or religious or boring bummer of a topic, but you're going to like some of the more inspiring things that philosophers have said about forgiveness. And my choice today is going to be philosopher Hannah Arendt. She describes forgiveness as a creative deed that sets something new in motion. It breaks old cycles of guilt and punishment, and it's an extraordinary human capacity without which we cannot continue relationships. Like, it's really hard to have a long-term relationship without forgiveness in it. So some psychologists describe it as a gift. It's festive rather than grimly obligatory, something we give to our offenders, and something that fosters compassion and love. And I do a lot of psychology along with my philosophy, so I tend to teach about both. I like talking about forgiveness to students in general, but I have before talked to graduating students about forgiveness because forgiveness is a bit like commencement in these respects. Graduation also sets something new in motion. It signals a change from old routines, a break from the past that you, to an extent, do leave behind here. Graduation also exhibits your human capacities and accomplishments. And like forgiveness, it structures your relationships differently. You'll have some relationships from Trent, but they're going to be structured a little differently after you go. It's going to affect the way you'll continue your current relations, just like forgiveness. And graduation affects the opportunities you have to form new relationships. So the very meaning of the word, commencement, a beginning, strikes me as essentially similar to the purposes of forgiveness. And graduation, like the way the psychologists describe forgiveness, it's ordinarily festive. And even in these distance practicing times, it's a gift-giving occasion. I hope you get some gifts. And hopefully it's not just the grimly obligatory acknowledgement that we're forced to certify you, right? I mean, I've been giving my graduating students grades, telling them you have earned a credit, but that's not really the nature of commencement, right? It's a beginning. So graduation in itself, I want to suggest it's a type of forgiving act. It doesn't just start something new. It even wipes the slate clean, or at least a little cleaner than it is, a little cleaner than it was. Some of you are going to dress up and celebrate, but we won't send anyone a scarf of regret, right? Like make you wear your regrets. We send graduates a degree or a diploma. We do not send you back the worst paper you wrote here. And just as forgiveness involves often rituals of saying the right words, going to the right person, or a special place to get it, so graduation is imbued with the rituals that mark this occasion as different, requiring different steps, the right words, encouraging you to feel that you have accomplished something. So I'm hearing no questions. I see no hands up. And this seems like a good time to give my last lecture part of forgiveness where I get to tell my students what to do. And I try not to tell students what to do often. I try to be a guide on the side, but there are times when I find it irresistible because I teach ethics to give recommendations. So I want to give you some recommendations. I've come to think graduation is not complete without it. So here goes. Here is my instructional guide for graduation. First, students, I want you to forgive your parents. In the last 4 years, they've said or done something that might have seemed insensitive or clueless or harsh. They weren't in your daily lives, and their ignorance of all the particulars on your mind may have resulted in their saying something they didn't intend or didn't even fully understand. And they're not going to understand you much better after graduation either, not right away. This is why Hannah Arendt wrote, "We must be constantly released from what we have done unknowingly." Graduation is a good time to forego your understandable resentment and give them forgiveness, especially since you may also want them to forgive you for things. Which reminds me, if you're watching, parents, forgive your children. In the past 4 years, They've learned so much. They've changed so fast. They probably spoke to you with impatience at times. They were probably astonished that you weren't keeping up with the pace of their changing views. They might have been irritated that you seemed to think they remained the same people they were when you last saw them. And one of the most exciting things about university, it's a thing I try to encourage, is working out what kind of adult you are. And that includes how you might want to change the person you are, how you might want to differ from your parents. And this is exciting. It's a form of critical thinking, but it's not always conveyed to parents with kindness. So as St. Augustine said, forgive them everything from the bottom of your hearts because their sins abound. And you don't even want to know the crazy, risky, foolish things that your student did here without your knowledge. In that case, you might want to forgive your students, even that which you don't understand. You don't need to understand all to forgive all. That's just not true. We'll talk. But this reminds me to turn back to students and say, students, I want you to forgive each other too. You don't have to forgive all your fellow students. And I'm not asking you to remain in or renew friendships. Most philosophers who write about forgiveness agree that forgiveness is not the same as reconciliation. The beauty of an ending is that you're allowed to part if you want to. But perhaps a certain knowledge that you'll never see some classmates again could make forgiveness all the easier. Forgiveness involves a commitment to deal with your offender, a commitment to deal. It doesn't automatically yield a roadmap to peace. It just gets you at the bargaining table. So I want you to consider dealing with rather than merely writing off your unforgiven roommate or your project partner, because otherwise forgetting them turns out to be impossible. They will live in your head. This is where relationships live. And it's easier to live with the relationships in your head if they include some forgiveness, because your memories are also a long-term relationship. Speaking of what lives in your head, I want to end on this. Last, my students, all students, the students I've had and the students I've never met, I'm hoping you all forgive yourselves. A rare few of you are perfectly content with your 4 or more years here. I did 5 years for obvious reasons. So a lot of you are perfectly content, and that's great. But most of us cannot go that long without doing something embarrassingly stupid. I cringe when I think of the classes I did not attend, the guys I should not have bothered dating, the job I didn't get, the job I got and I messed up at, the senior project I procrastinated that could have been so good. There were grades I did well with that could have been higher. I wished I'd done more extracurriculars. I wished I hadn't done so many at other times. And all the self-recriminations, whatever the differences in their content, often get added to the same self-blaming worry, now I'll never get a job, right? So self-forgiveness is sometimes, therefore, hardest. I'm so glad the previous speaker, Jaime, said be kind, and I'm saying be kind to yourself. But self-forgiveness is sometimes the hardest thing to do, especially when your own errors seem ongoing, right? It's easy to forgive other people who've done something in the past, but you can forgive them, they're external, it's all in the past, and you can move on. But it's hard to move on when you have to live with yourself. So I want you to take graduation as the opportunity to set yourself free. I want you to remember that you didn't always know what you were doing. Remember that you were growing and you were changing. Dealing badly with that is inevitable. It's actually part of the process. In teaching, we call it controlled failure, when we provide you with assignments at which you will struggle at first, right? Getting C's, D's, and F's is part of the process of learning how to do A and B work. And emotional and ethical growth is a lot like A's, B's, C's, D's, and F's. It's inevitable to do badly sometimes in order to learn how to do well. So if nothing else helps, nothing else I've said convinces you to self-forgive, remember that the future is no more under your control than university was. In many ways, it's less so. And this is a liberating realization. You could have made no mistakes and still find it hard to get a job, especially in this, right? You could, like me, have made the worst mistakes you could make in university and end up, as I did, with an amazing career. And I'm really lucky that my amazing career brought me to Trent. So remember this, the future has no mistakes in it yet. The future is this beautiful, unmarred thing with no mistakes in it right now. But if you don't forgive yourself, you're going to carry your mistakes into it. So I'm going to ask you to start something new. I want you to learn from your errors. Learning from your errors is one thing, but regret's another. Regret is at base just a bad habit. And philosophers since ancient Greece, including those Stoics who teach you about the circle of no control, have warned us against bad habits. I want you to set new machinery in motion, break your old patterns, release yourself from what you have done. My parents are very proud of me now. I'm very proud of all of you. I congratulate you, and I really want to thank you for having me. Giving the last lecture is a great honor. Thanks, everyone. And thanks, Stephanie.
Oh, Kate, thank you so much. I think if anything comes from this, I'm going to audit one of your classes next year, because I've heard so much about you and I've just respected and admired you from afar. And you just speak so well. So I'll be subscribing to your podcast whenever you do that. Thank you for sharing all the different pathways you took, whether you created them for yourself or they were provided for you. And it just goes to show, going back to Jaime's talk about not making assumptions, about where people came from or what their stories were, and same with Amelia's chat. And I think just sharing a little bit about the importance of forgiveness, because it's a struggle. It's really, really hard. And I imagine it's a practice as well to some extent, but I'll come to your class to learn more about that. So thank you so much for leaning into that and sharing just your knowledge. And again, I love a good takeaway. I always need something tangible, either in my mind or in my heart. So thank you for those lessons. Now I have the honor of introducing your last lecture's student lecturer. So Rachel Smiley, she put in her bio, is completing her 4th year, but I would say now she has completed her 4th year of International Development Studies with an emphasis in law and policy. Rachel's from a small town, so coming to Trent always felt like a huge metropolis. However, now it feels like a second home. Rachel has been quite involved at Trent in Orientation Week, the Zofsky College Cabinet, and the TCSA, the Trent Central Students Association. But what's really allowed her to embrace all of these opportunities was being a student at Trent, which some of our other folks talked about, and that importance of community. Rachel shares her experience that has shaped her like no other, and she is so humbled to be your last lecture student speaker and have the opportunity to reflect on her Trent U experience. Let's please all give a virtual warm welcome to Rachel Smiley. Rachel, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thank you so much, Steph. I can't believe the honor that I have to be able to speak to all of you today. This is something that I honestly never thought I'd have the opportunity to do, and I'm so thankful to be able to do it. Writing this speech is by far one of the most difficult, but also one of the most rewarding things I've had the opportunity to do at Trent University. And classically, student fashion, I did procrastinate it until the last moment. I guess the question I asked myself while writing this is, how do I pack 4 years of growth, failure, success, tears, laughter, and amazing memories into 10 minutes? I did it. I don't know how. All I know is there's so much more that I wish I could say. Our journeys at Trent and the road to arriving here, we all know, started way before we got an acceptance letter. In high school, I reminded myself that there was more coming my way than I would ever know. I played rugby, I swam competitively, played baseball, all while maintaining my grades and working part-time. I'm from a single earner family, I'm first generation, and coming to university was a learning curve for me. In high school, I started doing coffee houses, expressing my experiences with spoken word poetry, and that moment changed my life forever, doing those opportunities. Once I got a standing ovation, and it was at a time where I definitely needed it more than anything else. I never knew what it felt like to belong until that exact moment. And that was when I knew my future was on its way. Rachel 10 years ago would never have applied to university, despite promising her parents every day that she would. But Rachel 4.5 years ago, she knew exactly where she was going. And I'm so proud to be able to say that. I was accepted to Trent on December 3rd, 2015. And yes, I remember the exact day. But it wasn't until the following day, after finishing a swim meet, that I realized this amazing news. I came to Trent with expectations for who I was meant to be, what I wanted to do with my future, and I'm thankful for every twist and turn this path has taken. I cannot believe how far we've come. Every time I've traveled across the Ferry-on Bridge in my 4 years here, I've reminded myself how amazing it is to go to a university such as Trent. One of the most memorable comments from the first time I toured the university is, what other university has a river through its campus? The Otonabee River, meaning river that beats like a heart, is that river itself. And little did I know how this flow of water would become so ingrained in my love for this place. I never want to forget how it felt jumping into the river for the first time and realizing as early as my orientation week that Trent was the place for me. This was my second standing ovation, the second place I had finally felt like I belonged. I've come to appreciate each and every experience in my time as a student at this university. I had the experience that marketing teams put in promotional videos. I was a first-generation student, as I said, and I did put myself through university, and I'm very proud of that. I was an orientation week leader involved in cabinet and the TCSA. I balanced schoolwork with working part-time. I've had the university experience that I expected when coming to Trent. I profess my university pride at every meeting, gathering, and interview. But a successful university experience cannot be generalized. Mine is only one. I only hope we share some similar experiences and the same love for this university. This time has been about learning who we are, who we want to be, or maybe being even more confused than before we came to Trent about who we want to be. Managing time, learning how to cope, how to manage stress in many situations, handling every aspect of life that comes with also doing school. These are all things university has taught us that are not always shown on the surface level. We've learned in lectures, seminars, labs, and study sessions, online discussion boards, learning modules, every academic integrity module and library skills course. All of these things have taught us what it means to be a student in the field we've chosen. We only have yet to learn what it means to be a professional in the field we've chosen. We've tackled stress in bad a library or our rooms as we hit hour 14 or 24 doing an assignment. We've emailed professors at 3 o'clock in the morning desperately to be laughably surprised when they respond to us at 3:04 a.m. We've realized at 9 p.m. that we have an assignment due the same day at 11:59 and somehow gotten it done on time. We've sometimes maybe skipped a lecture to do work for another class, only to realize that it was probably the one lecture we 100% needed to go to. We've left professors' office hours feeling motivated to keep trying and eventually succeeding to the professor's happiness. We've realized how much these professors really did influence our success, and we're so thankful for each and every one. We've asked friends what answer they picked on the exam and realized we picked nothing close. We've laughed out loud with our friends walking across the bridge because it's so windy it could have blown us all off our feet. We've taken a dip in the river a little too late in September, and we've seen the holiday lights strung up all over campus, but most beautifully across the bridge. We've all wondered when people chalk the bridge because rarely do we ever see them doing this. We've all walked through the Great Hall for the first time, and you know what I'm gonna say, thought, wow, this looks like Harry Potter, or seen the LEC pit and felt like we were in a 70s movie with those couches that are built into the floor. We know Ozaukee is the cheese building, and Otonabee is the beautiful one with the red roof. Trail's the place with all the buildings named after women. And for those of us who identify closely with our college, they are so much more than that. These colleges are part of our identities. We've all probably experienced a lecture in Wenjack wishing we brought a sweater to our 9 a.m. We've witnessed the building of the Student Center and seen it become one of the busiest places on campus. 25% because of students studying there, half because of Starbucks, and the rest because of all the free food given out at events there. We've discovered a classroom in our upper years on our own that we never would have been able to in first year. The Environmental Science Building is where you can take a pencil down the staircase and hear music notes. The Chemical Sciences Building is where I would walk by so many times and make eye contact with dozens of people in lab coats. The Physics Building, which is also somehow the science complex, and it still confuses me to this day. There's so many parts of walking the halls of these buildings that I've only come to appreciate once being without them. From these walls came the people I've met, the mentors I've had, friends I've made and kept forever. Without them, I would not be who I am. Beyond the buildings, we've made so many countless memories. We got on the George North by accident and pulled the bell on East Bank for the wrong stop. We thought to ourselves, there is no way I'm catching that bus at 8:50 on the West Bank, and we have, and made it to class by 9 a.m. We've probably tripped up the stairs of the Student Center and acted like it didn't happen, and we've gone into the library, been kind of worried about how quiet it is, but still tried to be as quiet as possible going up the stairs. We've thanked food services staff, ground staff, university maintenance staff, all of the people that make this university run as beautifully and amazingly as it does. We've realized that our university really does put efforts into sustainability, and we cannot wait to watch it do even more. We've noticed that 99% of students and a lot of staff at Trent wear Blundstones and will use any excuse to wear a fanny pack. We've taken exams in the gym and probably almost cried in at least one. We felt a lot of success and a lot of downfall, but through these, we've challenged our minds. From all of this, we have our own little stories weaved within. I've jumped on couches with friends in common rooms on the 6th floor of Zosky College more times than I can count, but don't tell my Dawn. Endless Thai Express and pasta bar in my first year, and no, I will never regret that. Nights up way too late laughing in each other's rooms, even when we know it's quiet hours and we should probably follow those rules. We've lived in student housing or have friends who do. Some horror stories, but some amazing memories. And even though it's a learning curve, it was always so worth it. I've paid way too much money at orientation week auctions, but never regretted it. Stayed awake for hours on end making posters and road signs. I've bonded with people across this campus from other colleges, those including students, faculty, staff, volunteers. It's endless. I've learned what it means to care about someone else's story and learn from those stories. I've given out hundreds of TCSA exam care packs. I hope you got one in your time at Trent. And put up countless posters. I've spent hours awake at night hoping that government officials and those in power are listening to students and university needs. Although my story is not the same as yours, we have a common denominator, and that is Trent University. We've watched changes come our way that help us and sometimes hurt us. We've challenged legislation that we don't believe in, specific ones that limit students' experiences. We've protested, shown solidarity, and learned so much in doing so. We've expanded our minds, our hopes, and our hearts. We've continuously challenged the way we think, tasked with standing up endlessly for what we believe in, because we will never stop fighting for what we believe in. When we enter the world after we leave Trent, caring for others, our planet, about what we will accomplish are the greatest feats of our future. We are told as a generation that we're meant to let the grown-ups handle things. Well, we're pretty grown up now, and we're pretty well versed in what it means to change the world and well equipped to do so. I've had such a unique experience at this university that I would never change, and I hope you can say the same. The connections we've made will remain forever, and we know a few drops of blood do run green within our body. I hope someone or something at this place has affected your life, that someone's helped you along the way to make this worthwhile. We all may be from different programs, colleges, demographics, identities, but we share this. Knowing that those graduating in the year 2020, we have grown, learned, and succeeded. And we have so much more of all of these things to do. Our future is a blank slate, and I am so excited to be able to bring little pieces of Trent with me wherever we go, and that includes all of you. This is your standing ovation like I had so many years ago. I have felt like I belong at Trent like no other, and I'm so thankful for this place. I hope you know that you have somewhere you belong, and I personally would not trade that for anything. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rachel. I think what's so beautiful about this event, whether it's in person or virtually, is that we can connect on all these different themes and lean into vulnerability and share. But what is interesting for me is some of the other folks in the alumni have had time to reflect on their experience, and you're living it right now. You're trying to make your way through all these different emotions literally 2 days after our semester has ended, and trying to figure out what those next steps are. I'm not a Trent student, but I imagine a lot of the students, as you were going through all these different experiences and moments in their own mind, had like a film reel going on in their head. And it, even for me, elicited so much emotion. I almost teared up because I get it. I get how important it is to find a place where you belong. And I'll talk a little bit about that later on. So thank you for sharing. Congratulations on being this year's student lecturer. Now I will pass it over and introduce our last speaker and our very special guest, Dr. Stephen Stohn. So Dr. Stephen Stohn is Trent University's 12th Chancellor, and he's a well-respected entertainment lawyer, award-winning producer, songwriter, and author who has enjoyed an outstanding career in the entertainment industry since graduating from Trent in 1969. Throughout his illustrious career, Stephen Stohn has been an influential donor and friend to Trent, starting his legacy at the university when he was a Trent student. While he was a student, he co-founded Trent University's student newspaper, The Arthur, and also Trent Radio. We are absolutely thrilled to welcome and to have our Chancellor here, Chancellor Stohn, and speaking to us at our 6th annual last lecture. I will now provide a warm welcome to Stephen and pass the mic over to him. So welcome, Stephen.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. And I like that earlier you referred to yourself as a nerd. I certainly am a nerd also. And nerds of a feather do flock together. That's a dad joke. And thank you, Rachel, Amelia, Jaime, and Kate, for your wonderful words. I took it all in, and I'm just so proud of all of you. And I think what you're saying is going to be echoed in many ways in what I'm saying. I'd like to take us back to over 50 years ago when Trent was founded, and I was a student here. It was the mid-1960s, and there was a tragic and seemingly intractable war in Vietnam. Segregation was still rampant in the United States and elsewhere. Sexual freedom and the feminism wave were just starting to surge to prominence. And all across North America, students were demonstrating and protesting, some of them even dying, in support of a new order and a new role for universities and students in that order. We at Trent had our own protest march in 1966. Yes, we were caught up, like all students, in the need for a new order in the world. But in addition, there was something very personal to us that was also under threat. You see, Trent University had only recently been founded under the guiding principles set by our first president, Tom Simons, namely that to challenge the world requires education, but not just any education, rather an education which trains us to be adaptable and flexible and to think in new and innovative ways. And arriving at that mindset, that mind frame, by a multidisciplinary approach to formal classes, combined with a college system of interaction and social learning. That, in short form, is the secret sauce of Trent University. That's the Trent system. Well, that system was under threat almost before it began, because we learned that Tom Simons had been approached by the Prime Minister and was seriously considering resigning as president for a significant opportunity in Ottawa. Hundreds of us marched on the administration offices, which at the time were housed in a building in downtown Peterborough. We were chanting and waving signs. The protest made the national news, in large part because, unlike other demonstrations in North America, we weren't protesting the university administration. And quite the reverse, we were trying as best as we could to keep the administration doing exactly what it was doing, and under the guiding influence of its founding president, so that the Trent system could be properly fostered and developed under Tom's influence. Well, thankfully, Tom Simons listened to us, and he was moved to stay for many more years as university president, guiding the foundation of what has evolved into the Trent University of today. A foundation which has included things like being the first university to create an Indigenous Studies program, a university which quickly became renowned even back then for its excellence and depth in environmental studies and research, and the list goes on. And you, the students, to this day are carrying out those founding principles set back when, which means that the degree you are working on, and some of you are now graduating from, is not just a degree. It is a confirmation of a life and learning experience that is unique. I was pleased that Jaime talked about, used the word unique in talking about Trent. And here's how I frame it. Unique because Trent University is unique. The Trent system encourages and stimulates different thinking patterns, evolving from a variety of different areas of study and of extracurricular activities. In that former regard, I majored here at Trent in a combination of philosophy, thank you, Kate, and economics, two disparate fields whose language and thought patterns are in many ways polar opposite, but combined together in the unique Trent sauce, turned out to be an incomparable foundation for a career as a lawyer and a television producer, and now a chancellor. I benefited greatly from that approach, and you have benefited greatly from it also, even if you aren't consciously aware of it. So what does this mean for you? It means that you are special. Not that you need to do anything especially spectacular like inventing cold fusion or solving climate change or bringing peace to the Middle East. Rather, it means that in our everyday lives, using the skills we have all learned here at Trent to face and embrace the challenges which will absolutely arise over the coming decades. Not in anger and frustration, not with the rigidity, not by saying, well, that's the way it's always been done, but rather with the agility, the flexibility, the curiosity, the forgiveness, the openness, and the compassion that have been fostered within you each and every day here at Trent. And if each of us can, even just a little bit, work those qualities into our everyday lives and relationships and careers and interactions, then together we can be a powerful influence, a movement towards saving a world that desperately needs to be saved. The next 10 to 20 years are going to be tumultuous. The world is not just changing all around us, it's changing at a rapidly accelerating pace. Whether we're talking about COVID-19 or other pandemics, or other environmental change with climate at its core, or technological change with artificial intelligence at its core, or social change with isolation and divisiveness at its core and democracy under threat. The world in the coming years is going to become almost unrecognizable. That could be a very good thing. Could be a very bad thing. Probably it will be both. Regardless, the ability to respond effectively in the face of these massive changes is going to require a certain kind of mind, a certain kind of heart, a certain kind of soul, a certain kind of citizen, namely you. You. Yes, with great specialness comes great responsibility. You are especially prepared for the world that lies ahead, which means it's your responsibility to boldly go forth and explore the world, save the world, and make the world a better place. We can thank Trent University for giving you that foundation. And for doing all that, I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that, Stephen. Well, I've heard you speak a couple of times, but every time I think about the importance that you share in terms of your wisdom and your experience of where Trent began and being a younger institution and how truly special of a place it is. I've had the honor of working in a few different countries and for multiple institutions and colleges, and I can safely say Trent is really a unique place in the best of ways. And I think that's so important that you're able to share kind of the roots of where Trent came from and the values that are instilled when the institution was created and how that still really stands true today. And like Kate, you gave us a pretty big takeaway, or the students and all of us. And I think that's good. I think it sparks the fire, and you know, there's a lot of problems to be solved, but who better than a Trent student to solve a lot of those problems? So thank you for offering your words of wisdom to the graduating class and the Trent community today. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to, just to prepare all the speakers, bring you all back in gallery view just for some closing remarks. So you will see all the folks on the screen today. So thank you to each of you. Some of the common threads that I've heard, and we usually don't talk about what we're going to speak beforehand because I love the magicness of the themes coming together, and I don't want it to be, you know, created beforehand. And I heard a lot today about the importance of struggle, whether it's controlled failure, I called it failing safely, that we have, but the importance that that learning has and that resiliency that it builds. We learn when we're uncomfortable. like when it's a struggle. We don't learn all the time when everything is hunky-dory and life is great, because it's where those challenges, as hard as they are, when we have to think differently and think outside the box and all those things that Trent really prides itself on. I think what I learned today and what I'm reminded of is to really lean in with compassion and kindness, and how important that is today, but every single day. And going back to the nerd in me, I go to that piece of true belonging. And I think about Marsha Baxter Magolda, who talks about this, but the other woman that I truly love and adore, and maybe it's cliche, but is Brene Brown. And she talks about the importance of belonging. And I think that's what Trent, from the sounds of it, has really been able to create for each and every one of you, whether it's as a faculty member or as a student. Because true belonging, she says, doesn't require us to change who we are. It requires us to be who we are. And I think that's the beautiful part about Trent. It embraces and supports and motivates us to be who exactly we are. And I think that's so, so special. So thank you to each one of you for taking the time to dig deep and reflect on your own learnings and wisdom, because I know it can be difficult, and then you throw in the COVID thing and doing this virtually. It just shows how much you deeply care about this community. I do have a token of appreciation, so you will all get this in the mail. I'm a big fan of snail mail, so it was going to happen anyways via snail mail, because how great it is to get something in the mail nowadays. That's not a bill. And so you'll get that from me. But thank you on behalf of Otonabee College for just taking the time and sharing your wisdom with us. I'd also like to thank Trent University's Alumni Affairs for their ongoing support of all the college initiatives and welcoming each and every student to the alumni family this year. You will get emails from them, so open them, please, and thank you. That connection to the university is still so important even after you leave. I'd like to thank Amy Van Elswick. She was our Otonabee student staff who worked so hard on the live event, but unfortunately we are now virtually, but we still really appreciate that work. Thank you to Allison Scholl from Communications and Advancement, who supported this crazy idea of like, how do we do this online? And also thank you to Mike, our editor, who's gonna make this look really pretty. And then lastly, thank you to Natalie Nelson, all the students, and all of you who could make this event happen. So thank you once again, everyone who's here virtually and watching. We truly appreciate and hope you've enjoyed your last lecture. So thanks everyone, have a great day, and we'll hopefully see you soon. Bye.